Brigadier Anderson, Education and Training Services colleagues, I'm pleased to join you today, virtually, to discuss important topics in learning and development. How do we modernize our learning systems? How do we ensure we're getting good return on investment? How do we evaluate that we're making a difference? And importantly, how do we ensure that we're preparing our people for the fight of the future in the best way possible? I'm here today in part to talk about the ADL initiative. That's the program I direct. It reports up through the Pentagon in the U.S. Office of the Secretary of Defense. Specifically, the program does three things. First, it works on modernization for distributed learning. It also does associated policy and coordination, including international coordination. More interestingly, though, I'm specifically here to talk about some of our modernization efforts. In other words, how do we modernize learning? Now, when I say modernize learning, that implies that we're going someplace new. It's the future. It's the information age of learning. But it also implies we're going away from something. Let's call that the industrial age, or the old school way of learning. That old school way is defined by things like time-based and episodic learning, where learning is based upon how much time you spent in a classroom versus your actual learning abilities or learning outcomes. It tends to be assembly line-like. The same for everybody involved, focused on the curriculum or the learning objectives more so than the student outcomes, generally fairly passive, and emphasizes the facts or psychomotor skills versus higher order thinking skills or expertise. All right, so this is a little bit of hyperbole, but I'm trying to make the point that the old school way is no longer the way we need to achieve learning. Instead, we need a system that's a lifelong continuum, interconnected, personalized to individuals and teams, focused on their abilities, their learning outcomes, active involvement from those learners, and not only focused on facts and psychomotor skills, but focused on 21st century competencies. We've been calling this idea the future learning ecosystem, and you'll see why in a minute. But before we get to that, why should we even modernize things? Well, in the U.S. Department of Defense, we have a small library of publications that talk about how we need to modernize the way we train and educate, and the way that we manage our forces. I could also tell you that the world around us is changing. We finally have artificial reality, data science, virtual and augmented reality, and other tools that really make this reality a possibility. Similarly, we have increased understanding of learning science, neurocognition, and other kinds of ways that humans think and operate. That gives us the guidance we need to use the technology successfully. From a military perspective, I could tell you that the world around us is changing. We have increased operational demands. People need to learn more quickly, and learn at the point of need. From a societal perspective, we're facing a 60-year curriculum. That's a term coined from Harvard. In other words, people are going to have to be learning across their entire productive lives. And also, we need to prepare for human and AI teaming. In other words, there's a lot of reasons why we need to think about modernizing learning. But what should we all do? Well, I've brought three ideas for us to consider today. The first idea is that we need a continuum of learning, or in other words, stop building learning islands. All right, think about this. Let's say that this is your learning experience. It's your education course or your training event. What do you know about the students or the trainees before that event? Usually it's pretty murky. You don't necessarily know their skills, their personalities, their prior knowledge. And how about afterwards? Are you a good steward of passing that data on to the next person? What if, instead of a series of staccato, separated training and education events, we instead had a continuum where all of the different training and education events connected to one another, maybe even from outside of the military? And then, like a good relay race team, we passed on that data going forward. What if we were able to connect data from informal learning, like videos or books or apprenticeships, or maybe even from on-the-job performance, or life experiences, or operational performance? Now, that's a big idea, and we don't have to get all the way today, but the idea is that right now it's pretty limited. We can start small and start to connect things. So hopefully I've convinced you that we need to connect all of our learning islands together. But there's a small challenge. How do I know that the apples that I'm growing on my learning island will make sense with the oranges that you're growing on yours? Or in other words, how do I know that the way that I describe the learning content, the training and education objectives on my learning island will make sense with the way we describe the operational duties and will make sense with the way we describe the competencies and qualifications of the individuals? In other words, we need a common currency so that we can describe these things in the same way across all of these training and education events. Now, to be fair, we do sort of have a common currency today. That coin of the realm is time. How much time did you spend in that event? Let me compare it to the amount of time I spent in this event. But that makes about as much sense as measuring the size of our island to determine the net worth of the people who live there. It's not a very good measure. Instead, we need to move from this input-focused measure to more of an outcome-focused measure. To be clear, I mean that we need to make the coin of the realm competencies and credentials, or as sometimes is more used in Europe, competencies and qualifications. Credentials or qualifications are pretty simple. It's some authority that says, yes, I affirm this person has these capabilities. Competencies are a little more challenging. Yes, it's knowledge and skills. But it's all of these other things below the surface as well. And more than that, competencies are defined across different levels of performance based upon a description of observable behavior related to a job or duty. So we need to start using competencies, a common framework of those competencies, and then validating that people have them through certifications or qualifications or credentials. That gets us to the common coin of the realm. Finally, we need to professionalize our learning and development systems. Now, I realize that I'm talking to a whole series of professional education and training professionals here, so you already know that the quality of teaching and training is vitally important. A good quality teacher will increase student learning outcomes across their entire lives. This recent meta-analysis shows a direct correlation between teacher quality and lifelong student earnings. In fact, a teacher at the highest quality level will produce almost a $20,000 increase in their students' earning potentials after just 1 year of exposure. Similarly, a poor quality teacher will have a similar negative impact. And let me be clear, when I say quality, I mean instructional ability, pedagogical or andragogical skill. In fact, that is 4 times more important than subject matter expertise alone. Similarly, students who can teach themselves well, who have good self-regulated learning ability or metacognition, have really good student outcomes. Another meta-analysis showed that was about a 17% indicator of the variance in student learning outcomes. In other words, it accounts for a lot of the ability of students. So we know that we need to have highly skilled instructors. So let's just make some more highly skilled instructors. Unfortunately, that's probably not sufficient, because even if we assumed all of our instructors are good quality, that may not be enough. A recent study of high-quality universities found that 96% of chief academic officers felt that their programs were very or somewhat effective in preparing students for the world of work. And why wouldn't they be? Because they have that quality instruction. However, only 11% of business leaders agreed. In other words, there's a disconnect. The quality of training and education is not enough. We need to do more. What if our student is tired and your good quality training and education just doesn't make it into their brain because they're asleep? Or what if they're afraid of something that's upcoming, or sick, or distracted, or just angry? What if maybe they're angry because the user interface that they're trying to use to get to your excellent learning content isn't very good? So we need to think more holistically. Obviously, training and education and the skill in pedagogy, andragogy, and metacognition are critical. But there are more pieces to the puzzle. What if we considered learning experience design, ensuring that the whole learning experience has high usability? What if we borrowed from marketing or experience design from that marketing industry to really try to make messages stick? What if we leveraged behavioral economics and nudge and met people where they are predictably irrational? How about human systems integration, thinking across the entire system and all the life cycle pieces? Or leveraging learning engineering, using data to directly inform the whole spectrum of learning, not only at the point of pedagogy or andragogy, at the point of instruction, but across the entire system. Oh, and for the military, we probably need to stop tacking on training as an afterthought in contracts. If we're going to acquire a new system or a new piece of equipment, those people are not necessarily the same people who are best qualified to design high-quality training and education. In other words, it's important that we understand that this is a professional discipline with a lot of important moving parts that can't simply be an afterthought on a much larger contract. So in summary, stop building learning islands. Connect your training and education, learning and development experiences together. Be a good steward, collect data, and pass it on to the next. That could be as simple as a phone call to the next instructor or as complicated as a learning analytics system. We need a common coin of the realm. We need shared competency frameworks that we all can leverage and credentialing systems or qualification systems that work across all of the different training, education, and talent management factors. And we need to level up our professional learning and development industry. Not just the training and education component of it that's focused on pedagogy or instructional skills. That's important, but we already do that pretty well. We need to open the aperture and think bigger. Many of these ideas are presented in this book. So I invite you to get a copy of this book. It's been recently developed by the ADL initiative, and it's freely available on our government publishing office. It outlines a blueprint for how we get to this modernized learning, not only for the military, but across society. Oh, and our co-collaborator here, Julian Stodd, even has a chapter in it. Finally, one note. We can't be like this cat. Don't get so focused on your own small piece of the puzzle that you miss the bigger picture. The future learning ecosystem, this system of all these complex parts interconnected together across the different islands and professionalized to think about the outcomes at a strategic level. That's a lot, and it demands that we are all looking upward and outward, being good stewards of this concept and of the outcomes for our military personnel and defense civilians. Thank you very much.